Hello, everyone. Your daily update on Speaking Spurs is back once again with me, Kieran, talking all things Tottenham. So, we got three stories today. One of them is going to be quite a big story, and it's something we've spoken about a little bit before. Then there's possible transfer news, and then just a little bit about what's happening with the South American players, another update on that. So, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel, like and comment. I think I'll start off with the stories in reverse order because with regards to the South American players, there's been a little bit of positive news in the fact that Argentina has now come off of the UK's red list, which means Lo Celso and Romero are available for the clash against Newcastle. We just have to wait to make sure they come through completely unscathed with no injuries whatsoever. So that is excellent news. However, there is a feeling that Emerson Royale will be involved in the final game for Brazil, which could possibly rule him out of the game against Newcastle, depending on recovery days, etc. The next story has some humour to it, and a few of you may have already been involved in some of the humour and heard about it. So we obviously have Hugo Lloris, whose contract is coming towards an end, and we need to decide whether we're going to keep him on. And in the meantime, we need to search for a backup goalkeeper. This is something we struggled to do last season, but used the summer to identify someone, which is why Galini's coming on loan with a option/obligation to buy depending on appearances. So Galini is somebody that has been very well respected with his rise and prominence. He's come to us. He's done okay-ish so far, but probably not quite at the level that we were hoping for. So we've also been linked with Sam Johnson, who we know, English goalkeeper, in and around the England squad, very good between the sticks. The newest goalkeeper that we are linked with, and it's funny because of who he plays for and his name. So he plays for St Etienne in France, and his name happens to be Etienne Green. Now, the comedy doesn't just come from St Etienne and Etienne as his name. It's also the fact that St Etienne play in green. So he is Etienne Green of St Etienne that play in green. I know, it's a little bit to wrap your head around, but that's exactly what we're looking at. So the reason he's come onto the radar of not just Tottenham, but fans alike, mostly come onto the radar of fans because he's made his appearance for and his debut for the England under-21s. Now, the reason we wouldn't have seen much of him before this with England in the youth groups and stuff is because he was born in Colchester in Essex, and then at the age of 4 he actually moved over to France. So he's broken through at St Etienne. He's played, is it 8 times? Yeah, 8 times this season. And yeah, been called up to the England under-21s and made his debut. And people were impressed with him. He looked very good. There's lots of comments on social media, especially Twitter, with people encouraging us to sign this guy. It's strange though, like recently he's actually been in the French under-21 squad as well. Obviously, when they're younger, they still get to divvy about and make a decision based on who they want to play for. We've seen it with Jack Grealish and obviously playing for Ireland throughout the youth systems and has become a fully fledged international for England. Thank you very much for doing that for him for us. But you know what? He looks like a good young goalkeeper. I don't know how it works with homegrown talent because obviously he was born in England, but I think because he spent his whole career out in France so far, I don't know where that lies on that. I'd have to look into that more. I don't quite understand all the homegrown rules and stuff just yet. I haven't really had a proper look at them at any point. But, you know, it's good that we are still looking around and just haven't settled on the fact that Galini will be the man to take over from Hugo Lloris. Now, the main bulk of the video today is about this poor start to the season with regards to our energy levels and the fact that we are the lowest on running stats in the Premier League so far this season. So is it just laziness? Is it a hangover from last season with the lack of fitness and the guys are still trying to kind of pull their way back into life of football and the intensity we need to be at? Or is it Nuno's playing style? So there's going to be some pop-ups entering the screen throughout this talk. There will be bits about our statistics and things like that. So just keep an eye out for them as they pop up to back up what I'm telling you, basically. So Sky Sports actually broke the story, and it is quite interesting when you look into it. So we sit 15th on goals scored with a whopping 6 goals so far in the Premier League this season. We are 18th on expected goals, 17th for shots, 18th for chances created, 19th for expected assists, and a lowly 20th in the Premier League table for distance covered. Now, that's not great at all, especially for a team like us when you look back at how good we were at pressing and energy in the past. So to put it in context though, Chelsea and Manchester United are both in the bottom half of this table as well. However, there are reasons for this, and other teams around there like Villa and Watford and Wolves. So the reasons you'll see Chelsea and Manchester United in the bottom half of this table is because they both play high lines, they compress opponents into tighter spaces, they also have higher possession than the teams around them. Now, when you're the team in possession for the majority of the game, you don't traditionally move as far, especially when you're playing a high line, because the distance between the defence, the midfield and attack is not as far away from one another. Therefore, you don't have to cover as much ground, and your opponents are the ones doing all the chasing. Now, if we look at some of the other teams, like Aston Villa, well, they play counter-attacking football, so they allow the other team to have the ball, they take it, hit them on the break. Watford, for example, they're down there, they just don't really have a lot of the ball in games whatsoever, and they're quite happy to sit back and defend most of the time and absorb the pressure, so they're not knackering their players out at the same time. And then you also have Wolves, who traditionally cover a league low in distance. They have a deep a deep style, which they actually played under Nuno as well, a very deep style. But what's interesting is Spurs under Pochettino, we know that we did a high press. So the reason why we were covering more ground, even though we had quite a high line and a short distance between our defence, midfield and attack, the reason we covered so much ground is because we pressed from the front. We were a team that every position across that pitch you pressed. Someone got the ball, you're straight on him. Keeper gets the ball, you're straight on him. And every single player was doing that. So as a team, we were covering a lot of ground. Now, under Pochettino, we sat second for distance covered like 3 seasons in a row, and we had some of our best times under Pochettino. Now this all kind of started to slip after he was sacked. Mourinho comes in. As we know, Mourinho, through the stories that have been leaked, wasn't a great believer in making the guys do fitness sessions. He very much did tactical sessions and a lot of ball work and thinking drills, and had lots of meetings and stuff. Expected the guys to do their own fitness, and as we've spoken about before, if you leave us to our own devices, of course we're going to do a little bit less fitness because it's grueling and it hurts and we don't like that. So no matter whether you're a top athlete or not, the majority of them are going to give themselves a little bit of an easier time than they've had before. So that's kind of when we started to drop off. Obviously, Jose Mourinho was eventually sacked, and, at that point, Levy demanded that we have free-flowing, attacking and entertaining football, right? So obviously Ryan Mason took over as interim manager till the end of the season. It was a difficult one for him. He had the cup final to deal with, a lot of speculation about Harry Kane's future, yada, yada, yada. Essentially brought his friends back into the squad. Ndombele we didn't see any of. Joe Rodon we didn't see any of. And these, Ndombele had been massive under Mourinho. And despite the fact that we were covering less ground, we can't say it was a poor season. It was an indifferent season, but someone like Ndombele certainly didn't deserve to be frozen out of the squad. He was playing decent football at the end of the day. So after that, the search continues for a manager. We then bring in Nuno, which completely goes against everything that Daniel Levy said. But we know Paratici came in and he wanted us to be a little bit more conservative than just going all out attack in the style of Leeds, because the worry is we just end up conceding a huge amount of goals constantly. We're always running around, chasing around, but leaving ourselves exposed at all times. And that's not a guarantee of winning. As we see with Leeds, they kind of, have real up and down moments. Some games they take an absolute battering. and you don't really want that for a club like Spurs to be having games where, yes, you're doing all the running, but you end up conceding 5 or 6 goals in a game. So Nuno was obviously appointed, and the annoying thing about that is he's renowned for his deep and conservative football. But they reckon part of the reason they employed him is because he has an adaptability about him. So he has played different formation and adapted in certain ways. But however, a free-flowing attacking football is not something that he's had to do anywhere yet, I would say. So defensively, yes, he looks very adaptable. But in terms of attacking football, is he? I'm not so sure. So just to give you an example, if you look at the average positions, which should pop up on screen now, of Tottenham and Wolves. So Wolves are in the last season Nuno was in charge. Their average positions compared to ours, Wolves were actually occupying more players in the opponent's half than we do. So under Spurs, it's almost like he's become even more defensive. Now, I know we've had a lot of injury problems and issues with international football, and players have been in and out of the squad, but for some reason it's just caused him to be even more cautious in a team where he perhaps has more, I wouldn't say attacking talent, because they've got some very good attacking players within their squad, Wolves. I would just say there is more attacking prowess and faster players, so therefore we should be on the attack more often than not. But then when you look at players individually in our squad, so Højbjerg currently has the most amount of distance covered for Spurs. But as we know, Højbjerg pretty much plays every minute of every game that he's available for, unless, of course, there's rotation within cup competitions to give him a rest. And then Dele Alli is the top on average distance covered. So obviously he hasn't played all the minutes for Spurs. But on average, he covers more distance than any other Spurs player with 10.2 kilometres per 90 minutes. Although, you know, Jose Mourinho actually labelled him as lazy, but I think he called him a lazy trainer. So, yeah, for Spurs, he's the most productive on the pitch, without the quality, of course, which we've seen this season. He's really lacking in the quality in the final third. But even though he is technically our highest on average per game, he sits 59th within all the Premier League players. You know, for an example, James Milner is not getting any younger. He currently sits second in the table on that. So none of the Spurs players can match the coverage that a guy well into his 30s is covering for Liverpool. So it's quite frightening when you think our top player is 59th in the distance ratings. Every player within the Spurs squad has covered less ground this season than they did last season, and we thought we were pretty poor last season. But interestingly, there is a correlation between winning and distance covered. Now, last season, not so much. You were only 2% more likely to win if you covered more ground than your opponents. Whereas this season so far, it is shown that the fitter teams have an 11% chance. They're 11% more likely of winning the game than their opponents. So in our first 3 games where we won, we actually covered more distance than all 3 of our opponents. As soon as we started dropping off, guess what happened? We conceded goals, we lost the games. So there is a correlation. I do think with Spurs especially, covering ground is something that we need to do. We are much better as a high-pressing team in possession of the ball, free-flowing football, exactly what Daniel Levy wanted. And I really feel like we missed a trick in not pushing harder to get Pochettino back. I don't think PSG would have allowed him to go anyway, but we should have really showed our hand there. And then on top of that, as I keep saying, we should have gone for Graham Potter. His teams have the highest, or one of the highest expected goal ratios in the Premier League. You know, the guy knows how to get the best out of the limitations that he is given within a squad. The only thing he's ever been lacking is a quality striker. If he'd have come into Spurs, it would have been so interesting to see what would have happened. Now, I don't know how much longer this can go on for. I'm assuming, as Nuno is our manager, will be under pressure because of this sort of stuff, especially when a story is fully broken out on Sky Sports and they're putting it there for the world to see. I'm assuming he's going to be told, you need to get your boys into gear and they need to start running in games and working harder, because this is not Tottenham Hotspur. This is not what we can tolerate. The players should be fit enough. You know, we've got players like Lucas Moura. I know Bergwijn's injured, but Bergwijn, Sonny, Dele Alli, Højbjerg, Reguilon, these aren't. I mean, I know Højbjerg is not the quickest, but he's got bags of energy. Skippy is another one that's got bags of energy. But the other guys I mentioned are quick players. They can be up and down all game. And to me, what it sounds like is what we're doing is occupying more of a defensive shape instead of relying on the fact that our players are quick enough if we're on the break to turn and get themselves back and recover the ball if we do lose it. So it's almost like we're eliminating the worry of losing the ball and having to get back by sitting naturally deeper. And what we had under Pochettino, I remember in an interview, it might have been a Monday Night Football one, where he was talking to Jamie Carragher about the distances between his defence and attack. We had a very high line, we pressed very high, but we were condensed and had not much distance between defence, midfield and attack at all. And there was a move that happened, and it was a good team move. We ended up scoring from it. And in that moment, Jamie Carragher was asking about the distances, saying like it's so short. And Pochettino's answer to that was, I was actually annoyed at that moment because I wanted them even closer together, And it just seems like there's huge distances between people. We're having to play longer passes than we want to. The players look lethargic. And then when they do have to make those runs, because our defence is deeper than it should be and our attack is too far away, what's happening is if we lose the ball, the players are having to sprint to get back to the man that they're meant to be marking or pressing. And with that, you tire yourself out quicker. You need more recovery time in between sprints than you do with a jog or a run. Sprinting really takes it out of you. So this might be another reason why the players aren't covering as much ground, because they're exerting more energy when they're having to cover that ground. So therefore they can't put the energy in to continue to cover the ground because they're recovering. I don't know. Let me know what you think below about that. But it is very, very worrying that, considering we were right up there, second for 3 consecutive seasons in the distance charts, and now all of a sudden we are struggling right at the bottom. Now, do you think we made the right decision with a manager? Do you think Nuno needs more time? These are all things I want you to talk about below. Let me know what you think on that one. Where do we go from here? Is it the tactics? Is it the players? You've had the proof up on the screen. Let me know. Let's get talking. So thanks for sticking around for that video. I will be back with you tomorrow with another daily update. And that one will probably come out earlier because I'm doing a very long shift tomorrow. So I'll try and get that one pushed out and recorded on my lunch break, and hopefully with you before 5 o'clock would be great. That's what I'm aiming for. So by the time you all get back from work tomorrow or whatever you're doing, you should see that video. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and comment below. Stay safe, and until tomorrow, guys, come on you Spurs.